How you doing? So I'm here today to tell you kind of how to start up basically your first go at making soap. So the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need some sort of container and some sort of mold. You can buy mold on Amazon, Wish, AliExpress. They're a lot cheaper on AliExpress and Wish, but it'll take a lot longer to be delivered, especially at the moment. On YouTube, you can actually find that a lot of people who are starting out start off with things like they use the inside of like a milk carton that's been cut in half, or even you can use like a lunchbox or even a small plastic container that you know it will be easy to get it out of afterwards. But if you're using something like a mug or something like that, you might end up having to carve it out. So make sure it's something that you can push the back and it will pop out. And you can spray it with lining spray, but it tends to damage the soap a lot of the time, so you're better off not doing that. So what I normally do is, there's a lot of base work towards learning what kind of oils are good for making soap with. So Modern Soaping is actually a great website. modernsoaping.com is a great website for finding different things about different oils. So different oils have different benefits, basically. So you'll find something like sunflower oil has a really smooth, silky feel to it, but it's not exactly going to make the hardest bar. It's going to make a bit of a mushy, soft bar. So, and coconut is very hard and it can be very drying. So you only want a certain amount in your soaps, but, you know, then how do you make a whole soap? You mix a few together normally. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on a Brambleberry with you, and I'm going to tell you what I'm putting in basically. So on brambleberry.com they have a lye calculator. So basically it asks you whether you have a solid or liquid soap first of all. Okay, I'm going for solid, and then I'm going to measure in grams. Now they ask if I'm going to be super fatting. Now super fatting basically means is that it's going to be extra moisturizing. So it's changing the calculations for you automatically. So say for instance, if you want a certain percentage more oil than lye ratio, you're going to have more of a conditioning soft soap. So if you are going to super fat at a high level, make sure that you're putting in something there like maybe ethical palm oil or coconut oil or cocoa butter to make the bar a little bit harder, because basically what will happen is when it's on your soap tray at home, it'll just turn to mush basically. So I'm going to put in super fatting level 10, because I always do that because all my soap bars are always quite moisturizing. So what I'm going to start out with, I'm going to put in the oils that I've decided to put in today, just to kind of give you an idea. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in cocoa butter. So I'm going to put in 50 grams of cocoa butter. Coconut oil, I'm going to put 200 grams of coconut oil in. And then I'm going to put olive oil. I'm going to put 600. I think I'm going to put 700 in actually. 700 grams of olive oil. Then I've got 200 grams of coconut oil, and then I've got 150 left. 8, 9. No, it's supposed to be 600. Okay, and then 150 of sunflower oil. So that's 150 grams of sunflower oil, 600 grams of olive oil, 50 grams of cocoa butter, and 200 grams of coconut oil. I'm going to go through all the reasons why I'm putting these specific oils in. So first of all, olive oil is incredibly moisturizing. Some people say that olive oil bars can be too oily. What I do is to offset that is I always put a spoon or two of Colin clay in. Or you can put Fuller's Earth clay, you can put other types of clay basically that will soak in a bit of that oiliness, so you won't have as oily a bar. But to be honest, if you're putting olive oil in your soap, don't just wait 4 to 6 weeks for it to cure. You're better off leaving it for like maybe 2 to 3 months to cure, or even 6 months if you can, because you make a really solid, beautiful bar. Very moisturizing as well. And then I'm going to put in 50 grams of cocoa butter, just because I have a lot of cocoa butter at the moment. And creates just such lovely moisturization, but also creates lovely foam as well when you're actually scrubbing your hands with it. Because I'm using natural soap, I'm making natural soap here, I'm not using what most hand washes have, which is called SLS. Now SLS is has been linked to many forms of cancer. So I don't use SLS, I don't use parabens, I don't use any of these nasty chemicals that can go into a water stream and damage our eco-environment as well. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to create an environment that it is still fluffy, latherable soap that you literally can't tell the difference, but it's still going to be more moisturizing than the soap that you're going to get in the shops. So, and then coconut oil. Coconut oil, why I'm putting that in is it's actually great cleansing. Because it's dry, it's antibacterial, so it's great for putting into soap when you're looking for something that's specifically for cleaning. And then sunflower oil, again, as I said before, you can use sunflower oil or you can use tapioca powder. Tapioca powder has a similar feel. I used to make completely just sunflower oil soaps, and I didn't mind if they were soft just because they have such a beautiful feel to them. It's a very light oil as well, very light fragrance as well, because fragrance does actually come into play when you're making soap. And if fragrance comes into play, think about, okay, I'm going to add a certain amount of essential oil into my soap. Olive oil, very strong scent. You're going to get olives straight off. You're going to smell like an Italian restaurant if it's too strong. That's why some people prefer to use, olive oil that has been somehow processed. And the same with cocoa butter. You can get deodorized cocoa butter as well to make sure that your proper scent of your essential oils or your fragrances really come out to play. So that's basically it. So obviously the third thing you're obviously going to need is you're going to need caustic soda. So there's several websites that I use for caustic soda. If you buy caustic soda in your local shop, like if you go to Woodies or if you go to a hardware store and get caustic soda, you have to be really, really careful because there will be things with caustic soda to clear your drains. And a lot of them end up going side by side with caustic soda and bleach, or caustic soda and some other drain clearing liquid or powder or something. So that's really dangerous to put in your soap. So just make sure you read all the ingredients. And if it's 100% caustic soda, that's fine. And if you really want to go into detail of making sure you're sourcing everything and making sure everybody is safe for using your products, you're better off buying it off the soap apothecaries. So in the United States, you've got brambleberry.com. You've got so many different websites. You can get it Crafter's Choice stuff. You can get there's specific craft stores and stuff like that will have it as well. In Ireland, you have Bomar.ie, and in the UK, you have Soap Pot, you have Justice Soap, and several other ones as well. And what you can do is you can actually get a medical certificate to say exactly where it's been sourced, what the pH balance of it is, everything. So you're making sure 100% that everything is safe for your caustic soda, basically. And I know you're probably thinking, God, soap sounded so easy to make, but there is actually a lot of science involved. But if you're not a science-minded person like me, but you still want to make sure that your soap is 100% safe, then you're better off using the Brambleberry calculator. I know that some of the big YouTubers who have like massive wholesaling for their soaps still go back to Brambleberry every time. There is calculations you can get online as well to do the calculations yourself if you're into the math. And obviously it will depend on some of the oils that might not be included in Brambleberry as well. So sometimes you will have to go above and beyond to find another calculator. But the majority of the time I use Brambleberry, and I've only had one mishap, and I realized I had actually put in the wrong amount at the end. Again, I've been soap baking for 7 years now, and at the start I did make some mistakes, so that's okay too, and I'll go through some of them afterwards. So basically what this the Brambleberry calculator has given me, it's given me the amount of lye, which is the caustic soda basically, that I'll need. I'll need 129 grams and 74 grams. Grams of liquid, which is water basically. I need 290.11 grams. So water is really, really important. So I can't use the water in Ireland because there's a massive amount of fluoride in it. So if I use tap water, it will actually not set the soap. So what I do is I get bottles of Evian because it's something about the chemical balance. I tried different bottled water basically several times. You can actually get distilled water in your pharmacy as well. And if you get distilled water, you're without a doubt going to go well. If you can't find distilled water, you're better off going with really good bottled water. I also got Polish bottled water in Aldi and Lidl as well, because I didn't have any problems with that. There was very few chemicals in the water, and it meant that the soap set up properly, because you've got your chemicals and then the chemicals in the water, and if they're going like this, you're not going to end up with a good chemically balanced soap. Trust me, it is actually quite easy to make soap once you know what you're doing and once you get like the general 101 that you need. So it's giving me the amount of oils that I have here. So it's going up to, I have 1,000 grams, which is 1 liter of soap. And I have a soap loaf that I'm going to be pouring that into. So that's the perfect amount. But because I'm adding water and caustic soda on top of that, it's no longer 1,000. So I'm going to have 1,419 grams and 85. So when you kind of calculate everything all together, you realize that I'm going to have just enough to kind of make a nice topping on the top of my soap as well. If you're worried about how much soap your container takes, what I generally do is I will get a thick liquid. I will put the lunchbox on top of weighing scales. I'll pour the thick liquid into it, and then I'll measure in grams how much it weighs when it's filled up to the top. That gives you a generally good idea. Filling it up with water won't be the same, because water is much lighter density than say thick soap that would be oils and be a lot heavier. So that is basically how you do your calculations. So after that, what you're going to do is you're going to mix all your oils together. If you have to melt any, melt them and put them together. And then you're going to add your lye to your caustic soda, basically. So what I use is I always use a glass container for your caustic soda to be blended, because I've put it in plastic before, again, when I started out, and it will melt the plastic. So you need, say for instance, just like a glass jug, a glass bowl. Try to not use anything in your kitchen that you love, that you will be using for cooking, and try to have your soap stuff separate to your kitchen stuff, because I have had 1 or 2 very soapy spoons in my cup of tea, and that's been a huge mistake for me. So, yes, the next part is obviously adding the lye to the oils and fats. So when you add the caustic soda to your water, you're going to get a wooden stick or a lollipop stick or something like that. Not metal, not plastic, because it'll strip the top off the metal. It'll melt your plastic. So wooden sticks are actually perfect, lollipop sticks basically. So you're going to have to stir it, because that caustic soda is going to want to stick to the bottom of that jar. So give it a good stir. Try to keep a glove on if you can. And try to put a mask on if you can as well, because if you get it on your skin, first of all, you're going to get a redness on your skin, because this is at the unsafe level. It will be made safe in the soap after a few weeks, a process called saponification. But at the start, this caustic is dangerous to your skin. Always keep a bottle of vinegar beside you when you're making soap, because that will actually stop the stinging instantly. So it's a chemical reaction basically, so just keep whatever vinegar you put on your dinner, just put it on your hand real quick. And also, it's actually going to release toxic fumes. So if you can keep all the windows open, normally what I do is I will put it outside the window on the windowsill, so all the fumes just go outside the house. There has been once or twice when I have actually stayed in the kitchen with the caustic soda and gone, oh, it'll be fine, and I felt very dizzy and very unwell afterwards, so it's not a good idea. So the best thing to do is, when you have your hand blender in your soap to be able to blend your soap, pour the caustic soda and water down the stick blender so it goes straight in, because if it actually drips in, you're going to create more bubbles. So the best thing to do when you're making soap is to keep the minimal amount of bubbles, because then you end up with holes in your soap and it doesn't look very attractive, to be honest. And there's no way to fix it either, which is a very big pain if you're making a big block of soap with holes in it. So pour your caustic soda and water down the stick blender, and then gradually stir the stick blender, keeping it as close to the bottom. Literally, if you actually move the edge of the blender around the bottom of the bucket or whatever container that you're using. Again, you can use a type of plastic, but it would have to be good thick plastic for it. And then you just keep going, and every so often swirl the stick blender up. And this will actually bring bubbles up with it. And then go back down to the bottom, stir at the bottom a little bit more, and then work your way up. So depending on which oils you've chosen, depending on what fragrance you've used, and depending on what color you've used, is depending on how quick your soap will come to gel phase, which is the ready stage to pour. So say, for instance, some fragrances are actually listed with beside it on Brambleberry or the other websites. This will speed up your soap development. So, or you can ask your suppliers as well, does this speed up soap development? How quick am I going to have to pour? With most soaps, like specifically things like olive oil, or if you're using vegetable fats and stuff like that, it takes a long time. But if you're using a lot of like palm oil, if you're using coconut oil, if you're using cocoa butter, that's going to speed it up as well. So the best thing to do as well is keep your temperatures the same. So your oils are this temperature, and then your water and your lye are this temperature. So say, for instance, your lye water is hot, but it's too hot. What it's going to do is it's actually going to scald your ingredients. And this actually causes crumbling later on when you go to take your soap out the next day. So your best thing to do is I let my lye water go completely cold. And if there is a bit of warmth, say for instance, I had to melt some cocoa butter, there was some heat, I would at least let it cool down and keep feeling the side of it. You can use a thermometer. There's the laser gun thermometers. You can get them on Amazon, and you can check the temperatures to see around the same heat, and then you don't have to worry. If you are cooking hot, if you're using hot lye and hot oils, your best thing to do is to wrap a towel around your mold when you're actually letting it set, because then if it cools down too quickly, it will crack. So that's why it's just safer to cold process, as it's called. There is another way to cook, and it is called hot processing, and it involves cooking on top of a double boiler. I find it's just far too complicated, and it's terrifying to me making such big mistakes with soap. So especially when you're using expensive oils and stuff like that. And I always think, well, cold process is just so much easier. So again, getting back to the blending of the soap. So how to tell your soap is properly blended. So if you get a glass of water and you pour a little bit of olive oil on the top, what's going to happen is that oil is going to sit in a little pocket on that. So this is what's going to happen with your water and your oil mixed together. So if you mix your oil with your water, you have to get it to a certain state where it has gelled together completely. Otherwise, you're going to end up with what is called oil pockets. Again, you'll end up with like a rim of like yellow around the hole, and there will basically be a little hole in your soap. It will look like cheese. So that's a big no-no as well. So you have to make sure that your soap is well blended. I always think you're better off blending to the point of custard. Custard is the perfect point. You can go a bit runnier than that, but you notice this kind of gloss on the top of the soap, and it's completely even, the gloss. So you know that all the oil and the water has been distributed evenly. Also, I find when it gets to trace, people say when it gets to trace, it means you can trace the soap out on the top. So you can kind of shake the soap out and it'll leave, like, say for instance, try to drop out an M on the top of it or something like that. And if an M, comes up on it, then you know it's ready to go. If it gets too thick, you can always ladle it in with a spatula or something like that as well. Whew, there's a lot to go through today. Sorry, I always talk too fast. So, at this point, again, you're going to pour into your soap mold. And this soap mold is going to stay for 24 to 48 hours, depending on the ingredients that you've put in. So I always find that if I'm using olive oil, I tend to leave it 2 days just in case. If you're using plastic molds, excuse me, if you're using plastic molds, do test it after a day, because plastic molds are just so much harder to get the soap out, and you'll have to end up carving out around it. With silicone molds, you don't have to worry. Also, you have to wonder about cutting the soap as well. So say, for instance, I use a soap that is 1 liter soap, like in the soap loaf. And I use a large amount of coconut oil and palm oil, which are the hard oils. When I have to go cut that the next day, it's going to be particularly harder. So if you find a recipe online that uses particularly hard soaps, do actually try to talk to the person and see when they actually cut the soap. Because if you end up waiting a week for a very hard soap, you're not going to be able to cut it. So you're better off waiting maybe a few hours even. Like I make 100% coconut oil shampoo bars. And I got that recipe from the Coconut Mama. And it's a great recipe. And normally you wouldn't use 100% coconut oil in a soap. But for shampoo bars, it's absolutely fantastic. And it doesn't leave your hair greasy at all as well. So you're better off kind of cutting them early if you can, or pouring them in individual molds. That's what I've started doing, because I found once or twice when I was cutting them, it was just very, very hard to cut. I had to like properly level myself on both sides, and I ended up with 1 or 2 bars that didn't look very nice. So I actually started pouring them into individual molds as well. So on top of that, I'm going to go through any mistakes you might make with making your soap. So using certain ingredients can change the temperature of your soap. So say, for instance, if you want to put honey in your soap, you'll see in like 5-minute crafts videos and stuff like that, people pouring loads and loads of honey in. The biggest problem with using honey in soap is that a lot of companies actually put a huge amount of sugar into their honey. So if you're not using 100% natural honey from a farmer, it's actually going to have sugar in it. And sugar, when it goes into something that is heated, will heat it up more. So you have to think about the repercussions that it's going to have there. So basically, I've heard some people kind of make ideas where they would put the honey in ice cube trays, and they would put it in the freezer, and then they would put it in with the lye water, and then it would cool down easily, basically. So you're not going to worry about temperature differences. Also, if you're using hot processing, as I said before, you can actually put it in the oven. So make sure your mold is oven proof. Obviously, it has to be a silicone mold if you're doing this. You can put it in the oven and turn on the temperature to like maybe 50 degrees centigrade, and keep it at a temperature so the soap temperature doesn't drop dramatically. So you're just going to have a steady temperature, and you can do that and leave it in overnight if you want to. I have tried that and it didn't go so well, so it is something again that you can experiment with as well. That's the fun bit of making soap, is that you can experiment, you can have fun, you can try new different things. Now, the next part is embeds. So putting things into your soap to decorate on top. So the first one I'll talk about is lavender. Lavender is an absolute pain in the butt. Lavender, if you put it in melt and pour soap or cold process soap, what you're doing is you're putting a dried flower into something that has moisture. And the problem is that you're going to leak whatever colorants or any other kind of elements of that lavender is into it. And what happens is lavender turns brown in soap. So if you want to make a nice lavender soap, just use colorants for the purple. And if you want to put something on top, put it fresh on top when it's already made. You can put it on top as well if you want to. Spray it with a good amount of alcohol or something like that. But more than likely, it'll turn brown on your soap if it's mixed within the soap as well as on top of it. The same kind of happens with rose petals as well. Calendula can change color as well. Chamomile can change color. So if you're really trying to do the whole natural look, it's not going to look great when you've got a brown stained looking soap. So if you actually Google it, you can actually see natural soaps, and you'll see a lot of them aren't actually purple like the color of lavender or yellow like the color of chamomile. Chamomile will turn brown into your soap as well. So just remember, you're dealing with something that is wet. So if you're going to add something like, say, for instance, a lot of people try to do the whole the slices of orange that have been baked into their soap. I've actually had one person try it, and they actually their soap actually went moldy because the piece of orange has so much sugar in it. It went off faster, and obviously it had moisture in it. So therefore, and even though it had been baked and all the liquid had been drained out of it, it was rehydrated by the soap. So play with your soaps, have fun. Yes, you will find things that change and alter the makeup of your soap. It's not a perfect science with soap making. You would have to know literally every element of every product that you have. Generally, after a while, you just get to know different products that work and different products that don't. Also, as well, I've used different olive oils. I've used olive oils from Aldi and Tesco's. I've used olive oils that I've gotten from apothecaries, and the ones in Lidl work better. So it's it really depends, you know. And when you want to get ethical sourcing, obviously you can get the backgrounds from it from all the apothecaries as well. So I do prefer that because I wholesale now, so it's much easier for me to give to my clients if they do ask what's actually in this. Also covers your ass in terms of legislation. Now, legislation is actually very difficult because in America it's different to the way it is in the EU. The EU has certain standards, like a certain amount of fragrance that you're allowed to put in your soap. So say, for instance, 5% would be perfect for a Love soap. So you get 5% of 1,000 grams, basically. And that will be the amount you get fragrance in. When you actually smell candles, like candles will be similar as well. There's legislation about how much fragrance you can put in. And you're better off following it. When you Google it, you can go to modern soaping and you can see EU legislation about how much fragrance you're allowed to put in. Also, you have to be very careful about what oils you put in. So say, for instance, if you put peppermint oil in to a soap and put it on your face, it's not going to be very nice. I'm a massage therapist and a beauty therapist as well. And I used to do an essential oil massage, which involved putting a drop of cinnamon on the spine. And some people's skin could take 2 or 3 drops of cinnamon, no problem. Other people, 1 drop of cinnamon, even with a carrier oil, would make their skin red and inflamed. So you're better off using a cinnamon fragrance oil instead of actually using cinnamon. And using raw cinnamon is also nice, looks nice in soap, but it will cause irritation. Same with peppermint, same with eucalyptus, same with clove. So anything spicy and anything minty, basically. You do have to be careful with some orange oils, citrus oils, lemon, lime, anything like that, because if somebody uses something with orange or lemon oils on their face regularly, if they go out in the sun straight afterwards, they can actually get burnt. So I knew someone, because I actually taught essential oils for years as well, and one of my friends actually put wild orange on the bottom of their feet to kind of waken themselves up when they went to the gym. And when they came back, they actually had blisters underneath their feet because it had created so much heat, basically, because they're the more sugary oils when you think about it as well. So that's basically the basis of soap making. If you guys have any questions, I can do videos on other aspects of soap making. But for now, I'm going to make a video possibly tonight or tomorrow doing a Love soap just to kind of give you instructions on where to go. I'm going to use the recipe that I showed you today to show you how to do it, basically. That's it for now. If you guys have any questions, please do comment below.